Last days of the Midland. Every Saturday afternoon, just around the time of final score, and whilst the pink was still being printed, Darren could be found in the Midland Hotel on Lapwing Lane. He had woke that morning with a pain in his wrist that stopped him from rolling over and back to sleep. The night before, he had put his studded metal bangle on the wrong way round, so the studs, which usually faced outwards, were biting into the flesh. It was an alarm call of sorts. He rolled his legs over off the side of the bed, and he readjusted the bangle. He'd been out cold, but something had happened last night that he would have to deal with. He manoeuvred past the empties beside the bed and turned on the shower in the adjacent closet. After showering, he pulled last night's shirt off the floor and had almost put it back on when he noticed the blood. Friday nights were meant to be an easygoing affair. A few drinks with mates, maybe, or staying over at Leanne's. But Leanne was away at her sister's, and instead Darren had headed into town for a late night drink in Alaska on Whitworth Street. He clocked the group in the corner. You know the sort. White t-shirts, Lee Coopers, shots lined up. Then someone, one of them, saying something. Darren had taken it onto the street. Stopped it before it really started. Then this one lad approached him. Something about the way he held himself, as if he was concealing something. A glint of a knife. Darren knocked it from him, then dragged him out of sight round the corner and really gave him some, leaving no doubt he'd picked the wrong fella to be messing with. He'd gone back to the bar. There'd been some drinks lined up for him. Someone sorted out a line. Then the whispers that the kid was one of O'Reilly's nephews, looking to make a name for himself. Darren was out of the flat before midday. Didsbury was always busy on a Saturday morning. There were half a dozen old pubs which formed his usual Saturday routine. In between picking up some empty betting slips from the bookies, he'd visit them all. At one of the bookies, he placed 50 on a tip he'd been given, the second favourite in a selling plate, just for form's sake. The memory of the night before came and went like the wave of a particularly persistent hangover. He doused it with beer in a couple more pubs before he'd left the village and headed down Lapwing Lane. The door outside the massage parlour was open, and Teresa, one of the girls there, was stood outside smoking a cigarette. "Hey, soldier," she said. "Catching some air?" "Sonia says the punters don't like us smoking." "She around?" "Just me, soldier. Got some time, if you've got the dime." Darren checked his watch. Got a quarter of an hour. The hand job had calmed him down more than the beer. He arrived at the Midland feeling less on edge. They had the football on, a small screen broadcast from the illegal Norwegian satellite feed. The air was already full with smoke, though there were just half a dozen sat there. Darren took his beer along to his normal corner table, from where he could see anyone coming in and out. Then they'd arrive, young and a little nervous, usually in twos, sometimes on their own. They'd order a lager and then tentatively ask, Dad's here." A nod from the barman to the corner, and Darren would acknowledge them. They'd maybe ask if he wanted a drink. If it was a pretty girl, he'd smile. The girl would hug him like an old friend, and he'd take her up on the offer. They'd hand over the money, he'd hand them back a betting slip in return. It would have the name of a horse from one of the races that day. It didn't matter if the race had already taken place or not, whether the horse had won or the horse had lost. For these bets were safe ones. You always got good odds here. Darren liked having a regular clientele. After the one drink, they'd leave and go out to the public phone box. They'd ring a number. Nobody would answer, but they'd let it ring. The number went to a pager, and a few minutes later, one of Darren's lads would come by, knock on the door of the phone box, as if wanting to use the phone. The student would go back in and find what he'd been looking for. It took 30 seconds maybe. Anything unusual, and the drop didn't happen. Then they get another number, another phone box. By 6:30, the phone box had a queue outside of it, but Darren is almost done. He walks over to the bar and stands one of the Irish a drink. "I hear you had some trouble last night," says the old guy. "Not my trouble," he said. "That's as maybe, but you know, family's big round our parts." "If there's anything I can do to help," said Darren. "I'll let them know," said the Irish. Darren had got his message through. O'Reilly would understand. Then, at nearly 7, a group of lads came in, Merseybank lads, the kind he didn't do business with. He slipped out down the corridor and into the cold, tiled restroom, shutting himself in a cubicle. He could hear raised voices. The Merseybank lads weren't happy. They wanted to know where he was. But you didn't ask that sort of question in the Midland regulars. The Merseybank lads were ushered out. When they'd left, Darren came back over to the bar, and the barman leaned over to have a word with him. "I told them, we don't want any trouble over this," he said. Darren nodded. "There'll be no trouble," he said. Then he qualified it. "No trouble here." A double Jameson's appeared before him. Things would be fine. It was dark when he finally staggered out of the Midland. He'd not eaten all day, so would stop by the Canadian charcoal pit for a burger on his way home. There was a light rain, and he held his coat close to him as he crossed the road. People were catching a cab into town or heading out to Sevilla's for a late drink. There was a parting in the crowd, and Darren knew straight away that they were from Merseybank. He began to walk fast and then to run. He thought he was outpacing them. As he crossed the road, one of them had outflanked him, was walking towards him resolutely, concealing something under his coat. Last night it had been a knife, but tonight it could be a gun. Darren jackknifed between two parked cars, not waiting to see for sure. He glanced at the glint of metal before diving into the oncoming traffic. Another second either way and he'd have been fine. But the car sped up just as he ran into the road, too late for the driver to even make an instinctive swerve. All he saw was the horrified face of the woman driver as his body spasmed and bounced across bonnet and windscreen in front of her, and he landed with force in the road. Rain splattered his face. The regulars spilled out of the Midland. His pursuer slipped a gun down a drain in the road, and ran away down Clyde Road. The studded metal bangle had come loose on impact and had embedded itself in Darren's forehead like a crown